Once we have the stock and we have the machine set up, the next part is actually sort of the fun part. And that's where we actually start picking features and applying toolpaths. Now, you may be asking yourself, how do we do that? The cool thing about CamWorks is there's two different methodologies for this. They overlap each other, and you have the flexibility to go either direction, work in any way that you want to work. But what we're going to cover today is we're going to start by covering what I consider the automatic way first, which is through feature recognition. You may have heard of that term if you use SOLIDWORKS on a daily basis, because there is feature recognition that comes in certain levels of SOLIDWORKS. The cool part about that is part of that technology comes from the CamWorks side of things. They look for very different things, but the cool thing about it is they do overlap in some sense. So we're going to talk about that. And with anything that becomes an automatic data set, you would always expect to have some types of settings to tell it, hey, I want you to look for this. No, I don't want you to look for that. And then we can go through the process of defining per part how we want it to find that information. So what we're going to start with is looking at the page that tells CamWorks what to look for. And where we can find that at is in a couple different places. The easy place is if we go to our Options button on the CamWorks toolbar. It's a little wrench and a screwdriver. It's usually over here towards the right. Or you can actually go to your pull-down menu and you can go to the CamWorks page, and then you can go to Options here. You'll notice that the icons line up the same. And I'm showing you this because in Solid Edge versus SOLIDWORKS, the menus and the icons may change just a little bit. They may not be across the top. It may be on the left or the right. But through that, you can find it in any of the CamWorks pull-down menus, which is really nice and very useful. So we'll go ahead and we'll go to our Options tab. And you'll see in this box we now have a list of options. And the one that we're going to look for today is the tab called Mill Features. So in the Mill Features tab, this is where CamWorks looks when you tell it, hey, go find everything on my part and make my life easy. So to do that, we actually can pick in here which feature types we're going to look for, which type of study we're going to look at, whether it's manufacturing view. So on this page we have several different areas, and let's go ahead and look at different types here and break it down into sections. The nice thing about CamWorks is everything generally gets broken into sections. You'll see these light gray boxes that go around the part, and those are sort of broken out into specific groupings of how the technology gets used. The first part is the facet deviation and spline deviation. This one is set in a fashion where you generally do not have to mess with it or don't have to work with it. Force facet regeneration, that comes into play if we're doing really crazy surfacing type stuff. But for most parts that you're going to do on a day-to-day basis, this type of stuff you can leave set right here just as is. Down here in the feature types, this is where it becomes a lot of fun because you have the ability to really dial in what CamWorks finds automatically to save you lots and lots of time. For example, you can tell it to find holes, find non-holes, bosses, faces, part perimeter, tapered and filleted surfaces. So even if you're doing 2.5 axis or 3 axis, it'll find if there's a taper or draft on the part and then try to create a toolpath that goes with that. And then you have multi-surface pockets. So if you had several different steps or several different surfaces in a pocket, it'll try to find that and group them all together and make it one feature. Down here at the bottom, this is one of my favorites as well too, the hole recognition options. And what this comes down to is a lot of times in a machine shop or even like laser cutting, you may have different strategies for different diameters of holes, and you may want CamWorks to drill holes up to a certain size, and then after that you want to turn it into a pocket feature and go ahead and just mill it with an end mill. The cool thing about this is you have the ability to tell CamWorks, hey, find a hole up to 3/4 of an inch, let's say, because anything bigger than 3/4 of an inch, I don't necessarily keep those drills in stock, so we're just going to go ahead and mill anything that's bigger than 3/4 of an inch. The advantage of this is on a per part basis you have the ability to adjust that size. So for us on the laser, we generally don't drill holes, so we'll set the max diameter at 0, and then everything that we machine turns into a pocket. So this feature right here is very, very useful when it comes time to deciding how CamWorks goes about the milling strategies based on the tools or the equipment that you currently have in the shop. For this one, we'll just go ahead and leave it at 39 inches. And we'll talk about this little checkbox right here. There's lots of times when you import parts from other CAD systems, you'll see all the holes end up with like a split down the middle. So instead of a full circled surface down at the bottom, you'll have a half circle and a half circle put together. This cool little feature here will actually condense those into one feature so it doesn't find it twice, because you basically have two holes there if you look at it from a programmatic standpoint. So you can turn this guy on imported parts and it'll find just one feature in that spot versus two. In this area down here, we have the ability to tell it to create feature groups, and what that'll do is, like, let's say you have a hole pattern of 60 holes. Instead of creating a feature for each one of those 60 holes that you would have to check through to make changes for, CamWorks will automatically put those into one group. So if you make that one change, it'll change all of them together. So instead of clicking through 60 different half-inch features, we have one place to go to do all of those. The next little guy here is one of my favorites when you have to machine all sides of a part, and that's for check accessibility through features. One of the cool things about that is CamWorks will actually look at it and it goes through an algorithm of, hey, can I machine this from this side, or do I have to flip the part over and machine it from the other side? That's a pretty powerful tool when it comes to catching things when you're doing bidding or quoting really quickly. Simplify features automatically does what it says. If you have really complex stuff, it'll try to simplify it down into the basic groups, which gives you a lot more flexibility for making changes. And then you have the option to recognize features by depth. And what that'll do is it'll actually group them by depth of machining or depth of processing. Over here on the right, there's two different methods. There's AFR, which is automatic feature recognition, and then there's manufacturing view. By default, manufacturing view will be turned on. And the benefit of that is manufacturing view goes through a bigger in-depth algorithm that checks for several other things that normally feature recognition won't catch. Think of feature recognition as the generation 1 method for finding features. Manufacturing view is the generation 2. I generally run manufacturing view just because if I'm going to let the software do the work, I might as well try to find as many things as I can automatically and speed up my process. The last two little areas here are part perimeter. So there are two types of perimeters you can have in CamWorks. One is open pocket type and one is boss type. Each of them have their own little different features and machining strategies. It really comes down to the preference you have. For example, for laser cutting, we run everything under boss type, just because that way it puts a boss feature in and goes around the outside, and it's just one single pass like a boss. For open pocket, it'll actually see features and it has reliefs in it. It's a little more of an advanced type outer perimeter machining. The last area is local features, whether it's a smart pick or adjacent faces. That's just how CamWorks sees the geometry and goes ahead and selects it. Now, down here at the bottom, you have the ability to associate or disassociate. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the advanced features for this component. The last part is, what do we want to apply this to? Generally, you want to apply it to the active document, so all these settings will be specific for this part that we have behind the dialog box. What we can do is we can do system default, where this will become then the factory setting that we're looking for all the time. So with all these boxes checked here, the diameter set at max diameter, you can go ahead and hit OK to this, and then you'll have your settings set up.